All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1.73 podcast. Today we are joined by Father Mark Livingston. Father Mark, thank you so much for being here and joining us. We always love talking to you, so we wanted to have you on and hear your story. I'd love to have you start us off with just a brief overview on where you're from, where you grew up,
Sure.
kind of your life and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for a little while now, and it's just great to be with you guys as always. Yeah, I grew up in Detroit on the west side. I grew up in the city. My dad was a police officer there. So I grew up kind of, I don't know, like Rouge Park area, if you're familiar with that over on the west side. Um, so I grew up in, kind of like the neighborhood with all the kids out playing street football and all kinds of fun stuff. Um, just a really beautiful place. I went to Our Lady of Grace, for grade school right there in the neighborhood, and then Divine Child for high school in Dearborn. And just had such a beautiful kind of opportunity growing up. Um, my parents did end up getting divorced, which had a big effect on me trying to find my way in my life. Went to Wayne State University, studied economics there, and started working in finance with Kelly Services. So I was there working for them, not through them, I always say. So I was right there in Troy. Met a lot of great people in my kind of kickoff in business there. Um, and then got my master's in social work at U of M. Just worked at hospitals and in dialysis and just I loved that kind of work. Felt like I was maybe giving back a little bit more. And then I discerned when I was about 30 years old that maybe the Lord's calling me to be a priest. So at first I thought I was going crazy. And whoa. And because I was away from God and the church for a long time in my life, up until really 29, and then felt the call and uh, worked for another several years, kind of traveled around figuring out where I was being called, and ended up joining the diocesan priesthood for the Archdiocese of Detroit. So that's it in a nutshell. I mean, there's tons of other twists and turns along the way.
So Rouge Park, that means is it I think it's closed down like Brennan Pool? Or was it or there's a big there's a
Oh
huge
yeah, yeah, the pool
like
there. Yep,
pool swim
yep,
club
yep,
that
yep. It was right
because
in there.
we played golf not long ago at that there's a beautiful golf course that follows the river there.
Yeah, so so there was like the Rouge Park Barns for mounted police right there, and all kinds of like, baseball diamonds and stuff like that. Yep. Kind of
What
near
was it
Spinoza and yeah, uh-huh.
what was it like growing up in Detroit?
It was good. I mean, I loved it. Um, you know, I had friends over kind of in Warrendale, which would be the other side of Rouge Park towards Southfield. And then also had a lot of friends just on my side of Rouge Park. So Rouge Park was kind of like a divider right there. It was a lot of families just that were city workers, like a lot of the people kind of lived along the band, whether it's east side or west side, they kind of lived on that band of the outer kind of rim of Detroit, and it was just awesome. I mean, a lot of I guess I just think of like all the success stories of kids from the neighborhood, of some who went through the military and others who got into nursing and healthcare or whatever it happened to be. But it was a great place. As time went on, it became kind of more of a mixed neighborhood, racially and everything. And but when I was young, it was predominantly white, and but just kind of an awesome place to grow up. Just have friends of all different kinds, and playing basketball and street football and street hockey when we could, and all that beautiful stuff. Yeah. I mean, as I got older, getting in trouble, that was always part of it too, which, you know, gosh, I don't know. Well, I'll let you ask me about that if you want to know more, but
Well, it's
I won't
it's it's like
volunteer that.
it's like hold on. I thought any in in your case or our case
Yep.
as Catholics, I would you would think like any man would who discerns the priesthood probably has just had a squeaky clean life, right? Like
Yeah, sure. Right,
from
right.
birth to that day that God calls you to your
Yeah,
vocation. Uh, but
yeah.
maybe not really.
Well, I hope everyone knows that all priests are hatched out of priestly eggs, right? They're
Right.
perfect. They're perfect. Um, yeah, wow. No, not at all. So, yeah, it's funny. I often joke with some of my parishioners and say, I didn't hatch out of an egg, from angelic choirs or something. Growing up in a normal family, I guess, for today's modern standard, where, it was it was a beautiful thing and a tough thing because, when your parents split up, when you're a teenager, it's a tricky thing, it's a really tough thing, and things weren't always perfect, in the home, which, could describe everyone's family, and I'll kind of leave it there. But loving my parents, knowing that they did the best they could, and that took a long time though to kind of arrive at that, to let go of like frustration, anger, disappointment, and then going down the wrong path, right? Where you go from maybe a house with a ton of rules and to a house with no rules almost, and then getting into high school and kind of the complexity of relationships and interactions with drinking and stuff like that. And yeah, you kind of you maybe lose your way, maybe experience the world however you want to look at it, and you just kind of hope, and gosh, you're doing it right. For me, I came back to discovering who Jesus was and who the Lord was probably in my late 20s, like probably 29 and hanging on by a thread. I was a late bloomer, so yeah.
It took some time for that egg to hatch.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
hmm
The
hmm
golden egg of the priesthood.
Yeah. Well, I think it's,
Seriously.
when you're growing up, sometimes, you don't, you don't even have a guidepost to figure out, like, is
Yeah.
this the right way? You kind of drift, you drift into those groups of friends that you think are, right for you, quote
Yeah.
unquote, and they bring you into things that, you kind of figure out maybe this isn't right for me. And it's, I think there's a balance between like taking responsibility for that, but also being like, well, I was naive and I can learn from this, but I'm not gonna beat myself up or punish myself for something where I didn't have the guideposts, I didn't have the lessons to form a good group around me at that time.
Yeah, that's a great point, Henry. I mean, I often say this to people like in confession or something where, they're struggling with forgiving themselves, and because it's an exercise I had to do myself, where I kind of remember like an experience in prayer where I was just thinking about past wounds. This was a while back, years and years and years ago. Thinking about past wounds and just, how come you let this happen, Lord? And why did I have to fail in that aspect, like whether it was in business or whatever, and kind of pouring my heart out to him. And I just remember these responses of like, who would do that to you? Someone who's healthy or sick, someone who's maybe broken or whole, someone who's secure or insecure, and someone who's maybe lost and away from the Lord or found in with him. And those kind of gentle questions that came up in my heart kind of helped me to understand I can apply that to myself too, right? And I can look back at time A and say, man, I'm beating myself up for knowledge I have now, right? That I didn't have back then. And I can say, I can look on myself years ago and say, pity myself, kind of, a biblical pity where I just say he was like a sheep without a shepherd, and I was lost, broken, hurting, and insecure, and I can kind of let it go. Yeah, yeah, good point.
We said we shared when we were just kind of warming up before we hit the record button,
Yeah,
Father Mark, that if there's anything you don't want to share, please don't share it.
yeah.
But what comes to mind is, well, I'm just curious, how do you think your parents' divorce influenced in any way, shape, or form your call, or your perhaps your choice to accept a call to the priesthood?
Yeah, I mean, boy, that's a tough one. I would say that it was, it kind of frees you in some sense, right? Like there are certain expectations, I think, from family members, and maybe this is more like a family unit thing than it is particularly divorce thing. But um, I remember talking to my mom and dad, and they were always so supportive about whatever I wanted, but they were so supportive about everything that there was really nothing in particular, right? That was kind of being, saying talked about with like, you seem like you have gifts here or there. So it kind of freed me up to just kind of discover. One gift I do think that my parents imparted to me was just kind of a detachment from like material stuff, and my mom kind of teaching us about how we should use things to like help better us and other people rather than like kind of a selfishness to it. And so for me, when I had like those really good paying jobs, and then that really good paying job, and then suddenly I'm thinking about leaving it all, um, you know um the biggest choice was to become a social worker, really. So I kind of detached before I even be thought about the priesthood, because I took a huge pay cut there. Um, and then it was kind of an easier transition there to go from helping people in general to helping people for Christ, right? But I would say that the wounds that came from the divorce, I feel very comfortable talking about it because I feel like I've worked through so much of it that, I think it's always with you. And I know a lot of people today have experienced that in their own lives and hearts. And through the insecurities, feeling like that's for other people, it's not for me, or they're better than me, I should just kind of take a back seat. There are all kinds of these things that cross our minds and hearts that I don't feel uncomfortable talking about, because I hope that it always gives people a chance to examine themselves in a safe space to say, you know um I struggle with that too as a business leader, or I struggle with that too as like a son or daughter, and I just would rather share what's going on internally with me so that other people might feel freed up. And bringing those things, kind of becoming aware of those things, and then understanding what was behind them and bringing them into like healing settings, especially prayer. Um, it kind of helped me not only to be set free from maybe the measures of the world, um, but also to feel set free from like the temptations of the past to throw in the towel, um, that somehow I don't measure up, and to accept the fact that I'm absolutely loved by the Lord, right? And I think something something good broke in me, right? In the sense of like there was a good breaking down, right? The walls that sometimes we put up kind of got smashed a little bit so that I could go forward and discover most fully where I think I would find the most fulfillment in life.
Hmm. It's funny when you were saying that I was thinking to myself, I don't know why this came up in my mind, but I was thinking of the Wizard of Oz, and how
Mm,
Oz is the big scary guy in the Emerald City, and then he ends up just like once the gang faces him, it turns out he's just some guy behind a curtain,
right.
and obviously foregoing all the entertainment part of that, the meat of that is, facing that fear or that trauma or whatever it has
Right.
from the past or the present. I think it really I think more often than not you end up realizing that it's a lot smaller than it is, and just the confrontation to do it rather than the actual thing itself sometimes can be more scary.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Hmm.
Well, it's interesting. We're pursuing some in our business now. Henry's very involved with this. We're pursuing some goals and objectives that are, I'll say it this way, they're monumental in comparison to what we've pursued in the past. Well, perhaps it's scaring the heck out of me, though. And it's, getting confronted with, I love control. Having both hands on that steering wheel, super tight grip. I'm running the navigation system. I'm in control of the music or the podcast. Henry's been in the car enough times with me to understand how that goes. And I realized that seeing this bigger future, which I believe is actually part of, well, I'll say it this way, I truly believe like the mission that I've been called on, the business is absolutely an element of that, or perhaps a vehicle for that, and that this future that we're promising that's so much bigger than we've ever promised before is part of that. My point being, like, I've confronted having to give up control like I've never been confronted before. And I'm curious how you see this idea of like the desire to have control as it compares or relates to measures we put on ourselves. Because it was interesting, Father Mark, is that, what occurred for you and your family of origin, the rules, so to speak, or the guidelines that your mom or your parents offered, guiding you to what was more important than other things. There's still this element of constantly being measured in our culture, in our world, and that control seems to be a great mechanism so as to measure up. And yet, so many people I've met who have been successful in a myriad of different ways, not just in the business or material success, but in spiritual faith success, relationship success. They almost all of them will say, I confronted a situation where I had to completely give up control. And it's just like, how do we reconcile living up to measures with perhaps what's required is giving up control?
It's a great question. Boy, I have so many scenarios running through my head right now. I don't know where to begin, but um, I guess for me, you can never really take the business mind out of somebody. Once that's formed, it's just you're sitting there, looking at number of people in pews, and there's all kinds of things, and just having to let go. I just remember one biblical passage, which is just, I remember many, but just this one, seek first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be given to you besides. And and I think that's kind of been like a bit of a motto for me lately. Of course, as a priest, it is always, but just just a recent example with my school. The archdiocese has many different measures and controls in place, and we have to hit these targets and everything. And I just kept telling people, let's just do the next right thing. Like let's just do the next right thing, you guys. Let's not worry in the short run about are we, on the stoplight, kind of analysis, are we, red, yellow, or green? Let's just do the next right thing, and let's stop worrying about it. And so we kind of systematically handled things like looking at finance and fundraising and how do we make it so that we unleash the kingdom of God more, right? Versus saying, how do we meet this benchmark? How do we make this yellow green? Um, and we actually had gotten so good at just focusing on the person in front of us, focusing on the thing that we wanted to focus on, that when the archdiocese came out, we had like one yellow and all greens, and none of us were even really paying attention. We were just we were just loving people, talking to them, trying to find assistance, doing a lot, but not because we wanted to hit a measure, right? And I think it takes the pressure off um, of the control too, because I guess the other thing that I thought of when you asked that question, which I thought was awesome, um, having the trust in your people that they can do it, but having the patience with them that they can do it in 6 months. You know, and you know, the first 25 attempts are going to be, oh boy, a little rough. Um, and I often kind of I think of a saint, one of the saints. They say that like they found claw marks underneath his desk, right? He was known as a very patient guy, but he was like in the process like, "Urgh." And I think that that's like letting go of the measure mentality has been something I really had to do with my people.
Mm-hmm.
I still hold them to measures, but but I don't hold on to the measure mentality like, this has to be fixed by next Tuesday, right? I just remember that happening all the time in business. And it's kind of like trying to score a 36 on the ACT or whatever, or the 1600 on the SAT. Are you doing it because you really want to improve the kingdom of God or whatever you're doing, or are you trying to hit a score, and then move on without having hardwired change? And what's going to make, I think, results last is hardwiring change, which takes patience and compassion in the short run, and letting go of like that mentality of I want that red to turn green right now. I just think there's a sickness somewhat in business right now, and I've been out of it for 14, 17 years now. I can't remember, but just you know, I just remember every quarter worrying I'm going to lose my job. And I know I talking to a lot of people today still as a priest, I'm like they're still worried about this. Like it's still going on. It's like I get that shareholders are important. I get the demands of the market. But what I don't get is how we can strip the humanity out of business. And are we really like managing for a hardwired long-term change, or are we just trying to find the person with the pre-populated skill set and dehumanizing everyone else in the process till we find that person? I hope that helps. I'm probably jumping around a lot, but that took a lot for me to let go of control is the point, to because I wanted reds green tomorrow. And we had a situation just recently where someone was 13 years behind on something.
Mm-hmm.
And um I just had to kind of like bite my tongue in that moment and just take a few deep breaths and realize that like this is someone who's lovely, who's been here forever, and it just fell off. And the if we were in the secular world, that person might not be here. Um, but when you think about relationship and how she cleaned it up right away, it's like it took a quarter, but we're good now. I guess I just think of it that way. Like, are we forming hearts that are like converted to the mission, um, or are we just trying to manage to the measure and strip out the mission and the humanity? So,
Mm-hmm. I think I think when you end up chasing the checkbox to
Hmm.
check off, you end up dipping into the world of control because the goal is to just check it off as fast as possible. And you do that by micromanaging and controlling everything because you know how to get that check that box checked as fast as possible. And you're chasing a measure
True.
like you said. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I tell people this in liturgy all the time, right? Do I need altar servers, right? Um, if you want to look at a model of inefficiency, right? I don't need two kids to fumble and wash my hands.
Mhm. Who are still half asleep at the 6
Right.
a.m. mass. Yep.
I don't need it, right? I can do it more efficiently, but the long-term goal and hope is that maybe they'll think about being a priest. Maybe they'll have a good experience. Maybe they will feel a sense of ownership and belonging and want to remain within the church, right? It, and also they are great assistants, right? But the point is like we that's I think the control mentality, and I have it all the time. I have to constantly hit the double foot brake, right? Constantly to say, oh gosh, I think to myself, I can just do it myself faster.
Mhm. Mhm.
And let go, pump the brakes. Is this something I really need to do? Or can this wait a month or two? It's all good.
Yeah.
In a culture, Father Mark,
Yeah.
that how I say it, that so frequently measures success by growth, by visibility, by influence, by stuff. How do you keep your ministry anchored in mission rather than metrics?
We've tried to really take to heart, uh, our leader, I guess, would be Jesus, and his church. And so as I look at what Jesus said in Scripture, and I look at what he said through the church, that's kind of our guidepost. And I really do take to heart, seek first the kingdom of God, right? And so we have daily prayer in the office, and then we have weekly mass together, monthly adoration, which is sitting before the Eucharist and prayer in the church, and then an annual day of recollection. Um, I think also I recently created, a job like a performance evaluation. And uh, I basically put our values, which is humble, or no, virtuous, hungry servant. Those are our values, And and then of course the mission statement. I put those all. That's the four categories, The three values are the titles for those sections, and just some of it, the hungry part, the hungry is really about doing what needs to be done and on time, right? So that might be kind of the hard science of business HR, right? Did you get the stuff done? But three-quarters of the evaluation is more about the heart. Um, have I been a team player? Have I been a cheerful giver? A lot of it is based on scripture. And so now that I've kind of empowered them through that process of going through not only mission statement revision and also values, but now kind of hardwiring it to the expectations. Um, they know that I'm looking for a softer, gentler, more welcoming presence over someone who just gets crap done efficiently, right? I mean, that's I guess when I look at the mission of Jesus and the church, uh, there are a lot of inefficiencies even there we could call out, right? I mean, one guy who's healing different people, what about the rest of the world, Lord? Um, he didn't come to solve every problem. He came that we would understand he's the one who can save us and believe in him, right? And he'll come again. But the point is, like, yeah, I think hardwiring it more so in three-quarters of my expectations being, um, how are you living from the heart? how are you treating other people with the compassion and love of Christ rather than, how many widgets did you produce,
Yeah, it's interesting. Natalie and I went so good friend, John Hale has a
Oh,
wonderful
sure.
organization that does a lot of amazing work around travel and experiences for a lot of organizations. And one of them is this Good News Conference that they host once a year in partnership with Bishop Barron and the Word on Fire folks. So if we can just give a plug to both Corporate Travel Services and Word on Fire, just amazing
Both
organizations.
are awesome. Yeah.
So it was a few weeks ago in Orlando, and Father Mike Schmidt from University of Minnesota Duluth gave a keynote talk, and one of the things that really resonated, Father Mark, was so the theme of that conference was hope. It was so interesting because here's maybe an indication of like how I approach measures. I said to Natalie before we left, I was kind of hoping that it would be more like, let's go into battle theme, right? Like Saint Michael, and like we're gonna put armor on, and we're gonna
Right.
figure out how to be defenders of our home and our families and our faith. And she said, no, it's about hope. And I was like, huh? Father Mike gave this amazing talk, and this almost a framework to get to hope or to experience hope. It starts with affliction. Like affliction is a necessary ingredient because affliction leads to endurance, stamina, and that stamina leads to character, builds character. And character is that doorway to hope.
Yep.
And it was interesting. I'm forgetting exactly how he defined hope. I thought it was very, very interesting. It is like trust in God for what will occur tomorrow. And another speaker said, you can be hopeful, or you can be a hopeful person, or you can be a hope so person. So a hopeful person expresses trust, even in the face of perhaps chaos or failure. Whereas the hope so is like the lottery. I
Right.
hope I hit the number.
Right.
Where do you see hope play into mission? And perhaps where do you see hope play into this construct of measures that we put on ourselves?
Like you said, constructive measures, so not destructive measures.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
Um,
no, I mean that's actually right there is just a really great distinction. And it's interesting. Did you say what I wrote down was measure mentality?
yeah,
Like you actually have the mentality of measurement?
yeah. Where
Okay.
you might call it measureful versus measure on or whatever the analogy was for hope. Hope. Like where you're just so full of measures, right? That you're constantly evaluating people, almost like a judgmental mentality, I guess is my point there. Um,
Well, and that's a great distinction because a moment ago when you said there's destructive measure versus constructive measure.
yeah.
And that for me, that's a tough thing to discern because sometimes what I think is a constructive measure
Yeah.
ends up being destructive.
It, it's a tough thing. I just kind of think that I learn the measures over time that a team needs. I have to say that I think there are different teams that need different measures. Um, Boy, I've had some teams that needed to get off their butts and do something, So I want to see number of widgets produced.
Right.
And so sometimes that evaluation might look a little different than, but here I had people producing stuff, but doing whatever they wanted to do and doing it in a way that wasn't showing charitable love towards people. And so it was like a little bit of a shift, right? So I guess just that can sometimes be situational, but I guess I've read a bunch of books by Patrick Lencioni who um it's there's a lot that he's written and I think it's good stuff. But I think that just the gist that I've taken away is that some of these softer measures, things that might be considered softer measures, are actually some of the most production producing things in general. I mean, if we feel taken care of as a person, then I find those to be more kind of constructive measures. There are personalities in people. There has to be, certain rules in place because, if anything is too easy or too good or too much, people will take full advantage of that. And so, there has to be some kind of check and balance there between head and heart. Um, but I do think it's, two parts heart, one part head kind of thing, versus there being like a set kind of formula for it. And I'm not perfect at this. Um, I think
Wait a
the
minute. What are you talking about?
I'm terrible at this some days. Some days I rock it, and other days it's like, oh brother, tomorrow's a new day. um, but I guess what came to mind when you were asking the question is just the distinction between being faithful and being fruitful. Um, you know, I guess I've gotten in a lot of trouble in the past where I focus on how the fruit ought to look, and I think about a fruit on a tree, and fruit is something, and I think of this as like measure results, right? The fruit is the measure results, and I just think like I can keep every day hoping that the red delicious apples are going to come out nice, juicy, shiny, beautiful, and yell at every bud that potentially is going to grow something. Um, or I can keep focusing on tilling the soil, making sure there's enough water, um, and tending, to the leaves that are going to feed the root system. Um, and then I don't have to worry about the fruit as much, right? Um, I guess like, we worry so much about the fruit, we manage to the fruit, then we've just kind of lost the means to producing the fruit, which is human persons and people involved in that process. So I have like a little phrase I tell my people, like, you be faithful and let the Lord be fruitful, right? I mean, every time I've gotten really pissed or upset about something, it's because I wanted the fruit to be different, I wanted, dang it, uh, I wanted fellowship after that, mass. I told you 100 times I wanted it to have cake.
Hmm.
I, you had fruit. Oh gosh, who cares? Who,
Yeah. I
who, in the end, who cares what the fruit looks like? Because if you've done the other stuff right, the fruit will be good. So,
We had a conversation a while back, and our guest Alan, he talked about this idea of your mission is your compass and the measures are the dials on it. And I what I kind of gathered from that was, well, one, yes, you have your mission, your north, right? That's your mission, but your measures are there to make sure that you're on the right path. But sometimes you pick up the wrong compass. Sometimes you just have a totally different mission. Like, is your mission to, I want X amount of apples off this tree, or is your mission, I want to take care of this tree? I want to take it, I want to tend for it. And I think there could be conflict. Oh man, these measures, no one's measuring up to them. I'm not measuring up to them. Maybe it's taking a look and be like, well, guys, hold on a minute. Are we on the right mission? We have to define the mission we're on, and then we can see how far we're going down it. But sometimes we forget to take a step back and ask, is this the right mission? And so I wanted to ask you, has there been moments where you've had to take a step back and ask, is this the right mission? Or have there been moments where someone has come to you and said, we need to do this, like we need to take a step back. Is this the right mission? And kind of, on that topic of giving up control, um, if that's, a battle or situation that you've experienced.
Yeah, I think I think sometimes when you realize you maybe have been pursuing the wrong mission, you have to take control a little bit um, in the beginning to say we're hitting the brakes here. Um, and so in that sense, like you're trying to like reform people to a new mission. I mean, we can look at even just mission statement in general, just as a general construct. When I came to the church that I'm at now, the mission was to save souls. And as I prayed about that and thought about that, I just thought this is like a fruit thing, right? This is something I don't have much control over. So we started talking about how do we worship the Lord as He asks us to, and how do we accompany others in the process of discovering Him and falling in love with Him? And that's kind of what we went with in the future, because I just could see that we had the wrong mission in the sense of mission statement, but everyone was aligned to doing nothing because no one knew what to do. And now we have like, well, we're going to focus on worship and accompaniment. How are you accompanying people to Christ, right? Through your interaction on the phone, through whatever. Um, because we can take care of our faithfulness, right, to the mission. What we can't take control of is the fruit, the fruitfulness. We don't know what kind of fruit is going to be born. I mean, maybe in production industry, where like you're producing different things, yeah, you can know your fruit. I mean, you just produced 7,000 F-150s, right? They came off the line, you know that, right? But can you influence, people's hearts, right? To accept electrical vehicles, right? Can you, like sometimes that fruit can be really difficult to pursue when when you're trying your best. When you're focusing on the fruit, it can sometimes you can miss the opportunities, like for being faithful. I remember being managed. I was a manager at a law school, kind of right out of grad school, and I still remember the dean there wanted to be a top 100 law school. And so he came to me one day and said, "Well, I asked them in our faculty meeting, do you want to be a top 100 law school? You'll never believe it, Mark. They all said yes." And I went, "Oh, no, I can believe that." And I said, "Can we try a new way?" And and I took the elements that make up the one top 100 law school, that who wants to write and produce, 5 to 7 articles in professional journals every year? Who wants to do this and this? And we got about 30 some percent that wanted to be a top 100 law school. When you break it down into its faithful elements, right? What do we need to be faithful to produce the fruit of being a top 100 law school? I mean, if I asked, so you started to see it break down because we hadn't focused on the elements we need to be faithful to. We were focused on what the result, the fruit, we wanted the fruit to be. It's really hard to motivate people to achieve the top 100 law school status when they don't know the elements that go into what are the behavior changes that I need to be a top 100 law school. Um, you can get lost along the way, and that was just, I thought, a good illustration in my past work history where I thought, oh, yeah, if we don't find the component elements that we have to be faithful to, and measure those, then it doesn't make much sense, we're gonna save souls, everybody. No, Jesus is gonna save souls, right? That's not my work. My work is to accompany them, to encourage them, to pray with them, to show hospitality, to teach them how to worship and pray, how to put themselves in a position to be found and to find him, right? But we're aiming for something that we weren't ready to do the component parts to achieve, right? In other words, that's what I mean by, like, if we're faithful and we measure ourselves on the faithfulness to the component parts that will reach us to reaching that fruit we're hoping for, then that to me is a good measure, instead of just measuring someone on, well, I want reds to be green, you know?
It's so interesting, Father Mark. A couple of thoughts that come to mind. What I just understood, not what you said, what I heard, but what I
Yeah,
heard. Measures or actions or elements to be faithful to.
yeah,
So if that's the case, then if we feel oppressed or we feel constricted or we're suffocating under the weight of measures, then I'm wondering if that just means not that the measure's bad, but that the mission's off course, or it's the wrong mission.
that could be.
It's almost like if I'm heading in the wrong, to Henry's analogy, like if my compass is pointing north, that's where I'm supposed to be going. But what I realize is I've got a faulty compass, and the instruments the gauges are giving me bad readings, and I'm frustrated about the readings. I'm not. Do I blame the gauges on the dashboard? No, I probably need to check the mission.
That's a great
Um,
observation. Yeah.
well, because it's the I mean, it's a whole. Maybe it's a large premise of this whole
Yeah.
podcast. That mission over measure is that it's interesting, Henry. I'm almost experiencing a little bit of conflict in our title of this. I don't think we'll change it, but it's like, well, does that mean mission's better than measure? I mean, one could construe that, but perhaps it points back to the importance and significance of discerning the right mission
Yeah.
and listening, Father Mark. And you're such a great guide for us in this, is to be patient, to let go of the control, let Christ help out a ton in helping discern what it is, because you'll probably end up with the right one, or a better one, if you will. I have one. Sorry, I wanted to share that you just gave me some real clarity around how to explain measures in themselves are not bad.
Oh, yeah,
They're
yeah.
actually these wonderful actions or elements to be faithful to, so as to participate in that mission. Looking ahead, what what mission what mission does the church or you personally? And when I say the church, I mean literally like the Catholic Church, but I include Henry, me, all of us
Sure.
as part of the church. What mission does the church or you or us need to embrace more fully? And what measures or mindsets need to be reconsidered or released in order to have that work?
Yeah. Boy, there are so many smarter than me that have written about this, right? So, I would just kind of direct you towards some of these brighter minds in the church. Even locally here, I think someone like Father Grayson Heenan, or like from, what is it, Christendom to the Apostolic Age, or I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, Monsignor, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah.
Anyway, what'll come to
I
me?
I guess for me,
Monsignor
okay,
Shea.
yeah. There just are so many today that I think have kind of talked about what maybe is the mission of the church in general. But I guess, I guess for me, the heart has always been something so important for me. It's where I encountered the Lord. It's I encounter his heart. And I guess for me, if I could sum it up into one little phrase, would be like, reveal the mind and heart of Christ. reveal it, re-show the heart of Christ is charity, the mind of Christ is truth, right? And I just think those two in tandem, just what is true, beautiful, good, holy, um, and I think it was who was it? Saint John Chrysostom maybe, who just said, I could be wrong on that. If I'm wrong, someone smarter than me will correct me in the church. But he just said, like, if you preach, let your preaching like let the first way you preach is with your actions, right? Sometimes it's been attributed to, St. Francis that he said, preach the gospel always and use words when necessary, but that's not really true. It just says, let those who preach, in his rule, it says, let those who preach make their actions match their preaching, right? Um, so I just think, how do we reveal the heart and mind of Christ in our words for sure, but by living holy lives? I mean, there's no place for like scandals in the church, though. Anywhere there are human beings who are fallen, there will be problems, right? We see that in every church everywhere. But I just think the more we rely on the one that we're hopefully serving, then that mission of revealing his heart and mind, I think that will kind of take off from here. But it's got to be courageous and it's got to be bold. It's got to be, you know, I mean, there were times I feel like I'm not like the preacher who kind of goes straight up fire and brimstone. I think I'm more the preacher that will say the truth, but maybe with sometimes overextended charity, but still hitting the truth. And that causes people to have allergic reactions. Anytime you talk about what's true, um, you don't have to be a jerk doing it though, you can have compassion for people who struggled in the past. We don't have to scream about particular issues when, this already kind of screams at people, right? And you don't have to you can handle yourself with great gentleness as you preach truth to people. But I guess I just think that's the way forward, and that's the way I see it. I mean, now the problem is never in agreement on that mission. The problem is we don't agree on expression of that mission, right? Or interpretation of that mission. And some people will say, well, the truth is that God is love, and so everything is okay. And that's not true. I mean, it's true that God is love, but he's agape, which means self-giving love, which means I'm even willing to do the hard thing out of love for you, or tell you the difficult thing out of love for you, right? And so a lot of people have misunderstandings, and those cause a confusion in the measure, right? So,
Yeah, well, and you are a very loving, generous man and priest.
thank you.
I can attest to that. Um, Although when the three of us are all, I'll call it at Mass at Our Lady of the Blue Line, and you might throw a few elbows when you go into the corners for the puck. You aren't quite as generous and kind,
I
but
apologize for
it
that
is
slang.
That's just doing the
right.
difficult thing. It's just doing the difficult thing.
Right, I'm teaching you with love, tough love.
Right.
Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
Exactly. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Father Mark, thank you so much for being a part of this, being a part of the podcast. I really enjoyed the conversation. I know we both did. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can people get in touch with your parish?
Sure. So I'm at St. Augustine in Richmond. They could call out here, Richmond, Michigan. Some people hear Richmond, they think I'm in Virginia, Richmond, Michigan at St. Augustine Church. Or they can reach me just fr.mark.livingston@gmail.com. They can feel free to email me there.
Great. Thank you so much, Father Mark.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it. Great to see you guys.